About a year ago, I had been looking at apartments on Craigslist when I noticed a negotiation strategy that the landlord had used. I am not sure if he used it intentionally. Maybe he just had a good feel about it, but made the site in a way that made the negotiation flow a lot better to his favor. So I've been looking at this apartment that looked interesting, but on the page, it didn't say if there would be people smoking in there or not. It didn't say a smoking policy. And I emailed him, and sure enough, it's non-smoking, which is great. But I wasn't sure why he didn't list it. And given that I was going to go look at another apartment anyway, it didn't seem that wasn't the best choice. I emailed him and said, I think a good 80 or 90% of people here in Seattle want non-smoking apartments. I think it would be to your benefit to list it. And he said, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." And I thought that was the end of it. But a couple weeks later, I happened to stumble upon his ad again, and he still didn't put non-smoking. And then I began to realize I think it was intentional. I think the reason for not putting it on there is to lead people to ask questions. Because when people ask questions, they pick up a little bit of motivation. There's a little bit of a sunk cost once you start asking questions about an apartment. You feel like you've invested time. Maybe you invested the gas money to get to that apartment. And he wants you to sink some costs before you make your decision about whether or not to take the apartment. The other reason I can think of is that by waiting for the potential tenant to ask about smoking policy, it becomes it becomes something the tenant wants as opposed to the landlord. There are two ways to look at a non-smoking policy, right? It could be, oh my God, this is a terrible landlord. He won't even allow me to smoke in my apartment. Or this is such a picky tenant. He wants a non-smoking apartment. And I think the landlord would rather the emotion of the negotiation be the latter case. And this is a very good strategy if that's the case. I've noticed in my own negotiations with various people that the flow of the conversation is very important. I call this Floetry, basically the flow of the poetry going on in the conversation. Uh, but I've had a number of other cases where Floetry really played a good role in helping me secure what I want at somebody else's expense, make it their problem instead of mine. So we recently moved to a new office where I work, and the office somebody had plugged in an air freshener that was making me ill. Um, and I could have just said the air freshener is making me ill, but instead I started by saying that it's not very good for some of our clients. We deal with children. I'm working at a tutoring center. It's not very good for some of our clients. And then I added, and by the way, I actually got pretty dizzy the other day. But I made the fact that I got dizzy a secondary effect of the air freshener as opposed to the primary issue. And I also prepared by getting some air fresheners that would not be as intense that I would prefer to be using. And I explained, we have a lot of children. Some children might not feel comfortable about speaking up. And in fact, some of the children had told me that they had a problem with it. So I started by putting it that way. So I shifted some of the cost of the fact that, or some of the burden of who wants the air fresheners out of there, back to my manager. And so it made the conversation flow a whole lot better. Where else have I done this? This is a Mitsubishi Lancer that I'm currently living in. When I was buying the car, I went to a dealer who was he was Middle Eastern, and I started by because I used to have a Middle Eastern classmate. I knew that they despised pork, and I started by asking this guy, "Are there health benefits to not eating pork?" And I told him I hadn't eaten pork in some time, and what are the health benefits? And I made sure the flowetry of the deal started off on a good note. The other thing I did was to talk about some computer games I've written. I wanted him to think of me as a family member as opposed to a member of the public he could take their money and just run. What else have I done that involved Floetry? Sometimes when I do these private tutoring jobs, like I mentioned, I despise going to people's homes that have been smoked in or had air fresheners. In the past, I made the mistake when I was negotiating with the student or the parent or whoever. When I was talking to them on the phone, they asked me for a location, and I asked them, "Do you use these things in your home?" In the past, I made that mistake. Nowadays, I just go there, and if there's a problem, I turn away and I tell them, there's I apologize, but I won't be a very good tutor if I'm being distracted by these irritants. And usually, if they could see that I'm sincere about it, they know I'm good with tutoring, they'll make other arrangements. But in the past, I burned a lot of bridges by bringing these things up first when maybe the parent didn't even have these things. Like, I would say 80% of the time I go to tutor somebody, I don't have a problem with their home. But I burned those bridges just to save myself from the other 20% of the time. And it broke the flowetry of the deal, because I can deal with it when it comes up. Worst case, the home doesn't work. I lose that one deal, but at least I didn't lose the other ones that I wouldn't have lost. Where else have I done this? Sometimes, when I'm buying or selling coins, I collect coins. It pays to read between the lines of what the other party is saying. Sometimes you can tell that if you're buying from them that they need cash for something, but they won't tell you directly. Oh my God, I want to come up with $10,000 so I could buy whatever to resell. They're not going to say that, but you could sometimes read between the lines. But even when you do, you need to know exactly when to break into their lines. The flowetry is very important. If you just cut in there and go, "Oh my God, you need money, so can you give me a good deal on this?" That's not going to work. Um, it's hard to think about how I did this in the past. I'll know when it comes up. The point I'm trying to get is that there's more to the content of what you're saying than there's more to what you're saying than the content. It's kind of like when you're writing a computer program, you don't just write to the computer. You usually write comments to remind yourself what's going on, to remind other people who are working on the same project. I liken it to that. Except it's not really to that because you are really speaking to your opponent when you're having good flowetry. Thanks for watching.